All right, everyone. Notre Dame takes Georgia to the wire, but are there moral victories when it comes to the college football playoff? Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Glad to have everyone on the line to talk week 4. It's been a great week to a certain extent. I thought the Utah USC game was exceptional last night. I thought today's action left a lot to be desired, but still, hey, it's college football. I anticipated a lot for today in regards to big matchups with Michigan, Wisconsin, Texas A&M, and Auburn. The Georgia-Notre Dame game tonight, Texas-Oklahoma State, and a few others. They generally did not deliver, but hey, again, it's college football. Not every game can be a classic. We appreciate you stopping by. Would like everyone to join our Voice of College Football community where you get exclusive content and you can ask anybody that has joined our Voice of College Football community and the number of options of exclusive content that we've offered you that we would love to deliver on. And as soon as I get a lot of feedback there, we will be doing just that. Like, for example, having you on as a roundtable college football discussion forum once a week. All right, I'm going to get to the comments. And of course, the many games that are in progress include Nebraska struggling at Illinois, leading 42-38 with about a minute 41 left. We've got a halftime score. Colorado leads Arizona State 24-21. And a lot of FCS games going on. Group of 5, Colorado State, Toledo, Rams lead 10-7, UCLA and Washington State. Diedrich Felton has just returned a kickoff, and it wasn't where the sea parted and he just ran 95 yards for a touchdown. He basically just juked a ton of guys, shook off some would-be tacklers, and took it to the house. So UCLA putting up a fight in Pullman against Washington State, who's undefeated, of course, 21-17 right now. But Washington State, the Cougars, of course, marching down the field. They're already down to the 20-yard line. Let's get to the comments. And, of course, we will take your calls at 860-325-3687, and let me get that number on the line here in just a second after I go through some of the comments. Lucas, OH 77. I got to let everyone know I did not watch Ohio State play today. I've not seen one play of the game. Did not see one play. I was so wrapped up in the other 3:30 games that I didn't even think about my beloved Buckeyes playing. This is what the dedication to this channel has done to me. I was thinking about every other 3:30 game on the map, excluding Ohio State taking on Miami. I didn't even think about it. And then it was such a beautiful day. I told my son, let's go out, shoot some baskets, throw the football around. And we were out for about 2.5 hours. And we left. It hit me. Ohio State's playing 7-5, 7-5 in the first quarter. So we took a guess as we were driving home. I didn't check any scores. I said to my son, what do you think the Ohio State score is? He said they're losing right now. And he was kidding. Anyway, he guessed it as a 24-point spread. I guessed it at 32. Partially because I took Miami in 39, 77-5. All right, that's the least significant game of the day, but there will be more for the Buckeyes coming up. And of course, it starts with Nebraska on the road Saturday night. Lucas, Notre Dame showed they can play with the big dogs, but then again, I think Georgia played very bad. We could also make the argument that Notre Dame shot themselves in the foot repeatedly. 6 false start penalties, 15 total penalties for Notre Dame. The most, I think they actually had 1 or 2 at the end, maybe 16 or 17 penalties for Notre Dame, the most under Brian Kelly. If that game is played at a neutral site, maybe Notre Dame wins the game. Notre Dame wouldn't have had all those false starts. I can about guarantee that. And there was one call in there. I'll get to it in just a second because we do have a call coming in. Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. Reasonable Gump, man.
How you doing? Man. Good. How are you?
Yeah, so I know we just got off watching that Georgia-Notre Dame game.
Yep.
So there are some real snowflakes out there who get offended when SEC perfectionists like myself like to say our teams played bad, so I won't do that. Instead, Notre Dame, what are y'all doing in the second half there? First three and outs, you gave them a touchdown there, kind of like how they gave you one when they muffed that punt. Had no offense to speak of until halfway through the fourth quarter. And even still, they still could have won the game, even with those 6 false starts caused by the crowd. But they could have won the game. I don't know why they called that timeout when they made the second stop there down, inside Georgia territory.
Yeah.
They still had plenty of time on the clock. And Gary Danielson was saying that, hey, good, go ahead and take the timeout. I was like, I don't get it. There was like 2.5 minutes left. You don't want to score that fast. You don't want to give the other team time, assuming that you do score. I thought that was dumb, and it turned out I was right. In the end, when Notre Dame had no plan, they had no plan once they were getting down in around the 40-yard line. The receivers didn't know which direction they were going. Ian Book was just flinging the ball, wherever he saw movement. And then they actually got luck. Georgia somewhat almost bailed them out when they called a timeout inexplicably and gave Notre Dame a chance to talk and develop a play. You think they're going to come up with something creative, which would have been a perfect time to do so. And maybe they did. Maybe they were going to come up with something, but then they just completely blew 2 blocks. Quarterback was under pressure as soon as he touched the ball. And that was the game. I thought Notre Dame blew several opportunities to not only stay in that game or even lead it for a lot longer than they did, but they could have won that. Just if you turn around a lot of the mistakes.
So when it comes to the timeouts, I think from a strategic standpoint, you're correct in your analysis of the couple times in which they called the timeouts and the last series there, or the second to last series of the game. But we also don't know what kind of formations that the coaches are looking at that they feel as though that their team is completely unprepared for. So from a strategic standpoint, in terms of game management, I completely agree with you. But in regards to, we don't always know what the coaches are seeing in regards to what their team is prepared for. For example, Kirby Smart obviously blew the whistle, called a timeout on the Notre Dame rollout for the touchdown because he could see that his defense was unprepared and the Notre Dame tight end was wide open and scored the touchdown, but then they called it back and Notre Dame, I believe, scored anyway. But so we don't see that.
Yes. However, 2 little points of evidence to back up my point here. That last timeout that Brian Kelly was called immediately after the Georgia running back went down. So he was just
absolutely
doing it to save time. There was no other reason.
That
and
one,
the
I was
second point to back me up here.
I was talking about this. I was talking about the Smart timeout.
Okay.
But yeah, absolutely. They definitely, Kelly had it in his mind as soon as he got a stop on second down, he was calling timeout.
Right. And if you saw the camera focused in on his face when Notre Dame was down there not knowing what they were doing on their last drive, and he was silent. He wasn't talking into his headset. He looked like a deer in the headlights. He had no idea what he was doing. He wasn't involved in the play calling. I don't get it. It's like he called that timeout, but then he's like, oh crap, what do I do now? My guys aren't ready for a 2-minute offense. It was just strange. But hats off to Notre Dame. They came and dominated the first half. Again, even without Jim Chaney, Georgia still doesn't know how to exploit the other team's holes in their defense. They should have ran that ball 90% of the time. They were running the ball almost at will, as we all predicted. But yet Georgia comes out throwing, and they weren't even throwing deep in the first half. They were throwing for less than 5 yards. It was a strange game plan, and Notre Dame kind of took advantage of it. Not really. They weren't really driving the ball well themselves. Georgia played good on defense, but their offensive game plan in the first half was silly. And if Notre Dame would have gotten a touchdown, down at the end of the half there. Could have been a lot different. Again, if they would have saved that timeout, it may have been different. If I said this earlier, and you did as well before I called, if the game would have been on a neutral field and the crowd wasn't, against them like that, could have been a different ball. I expected a blowout. I'm not going to lie. I predicted Georgia to get in the 40s and Notre Dame not to leave the teams. Well, I was half right with Notre Dame, but I'm kind of shocked that Georgia didn't just come out there and just pound them. I thought they were going to be up 28-3 or 7 in the first at the end of the half.
So the one reason in which I took Notre Dame in the 14.5 points was because I figured it would be this type of game with a limited number of possessions. I can't say that I was confident taking the 14.5 points, but that was the way I sided. I certainly wouldn't have been surprised. And of course, Georgia was in a position up 23-10 in which they, it was 20-10. They lined up for the field goal. They could have went for it on 4th and 1, and who knows? They were at the Notre Dame 25-yard line. They could have, or 30-yard line, they could have cashed it in for the touchdown and gotten the backdoor cover. So I certainly would not have been shocked if Georgia would have ran away with this game, but I felt as though Notre Dame was good enough to keep up. And to your points, if you kind of wrap up everything that you're talking about, this is one of the few times that we've seen Notre Dame, at least, I don't think there's any question when you look at the two teams on the field athletically that you can pinpoint where Georgia's more athletic and faster in spots, but it's not a huge advantage. You can see where Notre Dame's in the ballpark, where they can match up. They're legitimately on the same field athletically. They lost the game based on mistakes, both coaching mistakes and player mistakes on the field.
Player mistakes.
All the false starts, the bad snap, that was a key situation in which they threw they snapped the ball at the wrong time and threw it right past Book, and on and on and on. Book made a couple not horrible passes, but the receivers tipped him up in the air. The one that started them out in the second half, that got them off to a bad place there when Georgia took its first lead on the deflection interception. That's not necessarily Georgia making a play. That's Book making an off-target throw. The receiver still could have caught the ball. They pop it up in the air. Georgia just happens to be right there to pick it off. That I don't consider to be a forced turnover. It's one thing when the DN beats the tackle, comes around the edge for a strip sack, makes a great play on the quarterback, beats the tackle. So that particular player forced a turnover versus you got a gift your safety at a ball tipped right into his hands. And yeah, Notre Dame made mistakes. Georgia made mistakes. You mentioned the muffed punt, which was a gift touchdown for the Irish. Gave them about a 10-yard field. So I still think Georgia's a better football team. I think they win this game 7 or 8 times out of 10, something in that range. But it would be fascinating on a neutral field because those 6 false starts, they came at bad times and would have extended drives, many of them. Not necessarily led to points, but changed field position a little bit. Had that kind of ramification on the game.
Exactly. But hey, I expected Georgia to win. I expected them to win a lot more handily than they did. But it doesn't matter because at the end of the year, no one's going to remember how they won. They'll just remember that they did. So
this
happened.
This doesn't hurt. This doesn't hurt Georgia. I think the question is, does it help or hurt Notre Dame? I don't think it helps them considerably because they lost the game. Regardless, we can sit here and talk about how they could have won, but they didn't win. They still couldn't cash in and win a big game against an elite team, but they didn't get blown out, and they were on the road. So depending on how well they play the rest of the year, this is either going to slightly help them or slightly hurt them. But it's not like a blowout loss would have crushed them, or obviously pulling out a win in Athens would have been enormous.
Yeah, if they would have. I got a Notre Dame guy at work, and I was kind of giving him a little, trash talk, all week because I honestly didn't expect Notre Dame to have much of a chance in this. But I did tell him if Notre Dame manages to pull it off, then I would have predicted them to make the playoffs again. As bad as Michigan is, and they just proved it for me today. If Notre Dame were to be able to beat Georgia in Athens, I didn't see another team on their schedule that would stop them. But like you said, or so one of the guys said that he doesn't think this knocks Notre Dame out of the playoffs. Yeah, sure. I guess anything's possible, but you're going to have, I mean, just ridiculous amounts of carnage start going around the country for Notre Dame to get in right at 11-1. I mean, it's without a really quality win. I mean, the best win that they're going to wins, I guess, that they might have would be if Michigan somehow turns it around or USC becomes a lot better than we think they're going to be.
Yeah, the way it stands, the way it stacks up right now, you get your choice between Virginia, Michigan, and USC being the best team on Notre Dame's schedule, and none of them are going to prove to be elite teams.
Right.
The best. It could be a group of 9-3 type teams at best.
You would have to have a bunch of 10-2, or rather 11-2 conference champions around the nation, I think, for Notre Dame to get in now. So, and like I think one of the things you started the stream with was, are there any moral victories? And honestly, no, there's not.
And when I said moral victories, I kind of meant twofold, meaning what we typically think of a moral victory in terms of, man, I feel good about my team. We really fought. We showed that we can play with them, but we lost. And maybe Notre Dame fans are feeling like that. I'm sure some of them are feeling as though, okay, we went down there, we competed, we came within one possession of winning. We showed that we can play with them. And I feel kind of good about that because, wink, wink, kind of like you, I was thinking it was going to be a 42-17 game. But then moral victories in regards to how is this going to be judged by the College Football Playoff Committee? And that obviously has yet to be seen. And I think it depends on the scenario.
So anyway, that's the climactic again for this one. Not end, I guess. You still got, Washington State is crushing USC now. I just looked at the TV. But, anyway, yeah. You said you didn't watch the Ohio State game. Which one were you busier with? 3:30, Texas A&M and Auburn.
Well, it was funny at 3:30. I was just mentioning that I get wrapped up in this and what I should be watching. So it was Texas A&M and Auburn was my main thought, but there were 3 or 4 other decent games. And then my boy and I went out and shot some baskets and played football and messed around for about 2.5 hours. So I didn't see much of the 3:30 games. I came back with about 12, 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter at that point. Mm-hmm. So I didn't see a whole lot of 3:30.
All right. Well, I won't take up too much time. I know you got a bunch of other callers. I will say, because I haven't talked about my team a lot with you lately, but I was happy to see that Alabama finally remembered how to run the ball today. It's been driving me no limits of craziness for this entire year that we haven't even been able to get a 100-yard rushing game playing not too stellar competition. So that was finally good to see. You can't be a one-dimensional offense because you're eventually going to, because of one-dimensional offense, if anything happens to your quarterback, which, as we all know, is not that unlikely with Tua. If anything happens to your quarterback, you're dead because a one-dimensional passing offense has a focal point with the quarterback. So I don't want Alabama to become that, which is for some reason I still kind of am getting the sense that's the direction they want to go because it's working so well right now against non-stellar competition. But you have to be able to run the ball. You have to be able to run the ball to extend the time of drives and give your defense a rest. Because once we're no longer playing Southern Miss and we're playing Texas A&M and LSU and later down the line Georgia, these quick scorers, they may work even most of the time, but eventually it's going to catch up to your defense, and eventually they're going to not even sell out to stop your run, and they're just going to put everyone back in the backfield to make sure your pass yards either don't happen or they're very short. So, yeah, I don't even remember the last time an Alabama team couldn't run the ball, and it's been killing me. So I'm glad to see they were actually doing that somewhat effectively today.
Nick Saban wasn't there. I'm trying to think of the first running back he had, the first big running back, and I can't think of it. 07, 08. Yes. Glenn Coffey. Absolutely. Glenn Coffey. So ever since he's been there, they've obviously had first one and then two and then four really good running backs, NFL running backs. So, yeah, the only thing that comes to mind about the Alabama game, and this is now 2 weeks running, and it appears as though Alabama and Nick Saban just want to take money out of my pocket. There seems to be some kind of last-second cover that always goes opposite my direction when it comes to Alabama football. Today it was Southern Miss in 39, and Alabama scored with about 90 seconds left in the game to make it 49-7. Last week I had Alabama giving 26 to South Carolina, and of course they're up by 31, and they let South Carolina score with 12 seconds left in the game. So that's what Alabama's done for me, and I'm not going to pay a whole lot of attention to Alabama. I really haven't seen them play this year because they haven't given me a game to watch. Of course, I'll watch them play all the SEC Western Division games, maybe Tennessee, depending on who else is on. And who else did they play in the East this year? They've got South. Oh well, they already played South Carolina. Yeah,
South Carolina. Yeah.
UCLA just busted a play on the final play of the first half, and indicative of UCLA, the state of UCLA football under Chip Kelly, the player was tackled at the half-yard line. They threw a Hail Mary deflection. The kid caught it at the 3. He got tackled, and he was inches away from the goal line. Time ran out. They don't score.
I think you and I are watching it's this TV at the same time because you're showing the replay right now. Is the clock out?
Yes.
That's going to count for nothing?
That counts for nothing. That's why they were throwing the Hail Mary. Nothing. He's basically laying on the goal line.
Did anyone see this coming with Chip Kelly and UCLA?
No.
I mean,
I don't think so. We expected to see improvement. We expected to see they weren't anything close to this bad when he took over. They should have left Jim Moore there. Jim Moore's worst season was 6-7. They were going to bowl games every year under Jim Moore at least, and finished in the top 10 once. So 8-4, 9-3 under Jim Moore, it doesn't look so bad now.
What exactly was their problem with Jim Moore? If he's taking you to a bowl game every year, what more does UCLA want? They're not a football school; they're a basketball school. They should like going to bowl games every year.
I don't follow basketball anymore, but I don't even think they're a basketball school anymore. They're like a volleyball school, if there is such a thing.
Okay, a volleyball school.
But I've always thought, Reasonable Gump, that UCLA should win in football. Why not? They're surrounded by talent. And people would love to go play there. They're in LA. They're a huge school. They do have a brand name. They've got a big name. You would think that UCLA should be able to build something.
You would think that. I think they have 6 national titles on record. They're all old, but if I'm not mistaken, there's somewhere around that number.
Yeah, 1954 and 57 would be the final 2 that come to mind.
Right. I think they had some more back in the old Rose Bowl days. Because they're kind of like the Michigan State of the West. Michigan State has 6, but no one really knows about them. Which is actually funny because everyone thinks Michigan State's just Michigan's little brother, which they kind of act like it right now, but they actually have quite the history with national greatness. Anyway, it looks like Texas took care of business with Oklahoma State.
Yes, they did.
I thought that would have been hilarious, by the way. If they would have went down, everyone thought they were playoff contenders. Texas is back. You know the slogan. If they would have gone 2-2 in the first 4 games, that would have been funny. But I should start eating some crow with UCF. I told everyone to play them on the spread every single week, and they go out and lose the game the very next day. So, good job, Pitt. I watched the final 2 minutes of that game. They came back and won it, and UCF still could have come. They had 50 seconds to go down there and kick a field goal to win, but they got sacked twice. Like Pitt was in there to make a statement.
Yeah, I kind of wrestled with that game in regards to the line, and unfortunately, I wrestled the wrong way. But there you go. Yeah, UCF's going to be an afterthought for the rest of the season, obviously. All right, man. Well, thanks for the call. I'll let some other people call in here.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I see some comments on the live stream concerning the worst teams in the SEC, and of course, Tennessee played the part today. I watched some of that game, and they continually play bad football. I don't think the talent's that bad. They play awful football. It's like watching. We've got a number of programs in a particular shape that I would have never imagined, where the talent is still decent at Florida State and Michigan and Tennessee, but they just play horrible football. They are ill prepared. They're mentally soft. Their coaches do not prepare them for game situations. Poor game planning, the whole deal. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Bash.
Hey, Bash. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
I'm doing pretty well. All right, let's just start here with the game that concluded rather recently between Notre Dame and Georgia. I heard Gary Danielson on the broadcast talk about how Notre Dame's playoff hopes aren't over, and Notre Dame fans around media are starting to echo that. Let me be clear here. Notre Dame's toughest two opponents on their schedule is who? Virginia and Michigan. Right?
USC, possibly.
Maybe USC. USC lost on the road to BYU. They had a good win against Utah. But I'm just because of how they're ranked right now, which it may not reflect by the end of the season, I'm just going to say Virginia and Michigan. Michigan got blown out today against Wisconsin, and Virginia struggled with Old Dominion.
Sure.
I don't see how there's a path for Notre Dame to get the wins without being in a conference and without that 13th data point. I don't see how Notre Dame goes and wins and gets into the playoffs. I just think it's impossible at this point.
Well, so we're talking about what should happen or what will happen. If you're talking about what will happen, I completely agree with you. If we're talking about what should happen, should Clemson make a playoff if they lose a game and still win the ACC? Their schedule's not as good as Notre Dame's. No, but if we're talking about what will happen, I completely agree with you. Notre Dame has but you cannot blame the Notre Dame fan for getting online and campaigning for their team and their team's effort and their team's ability to stay within shouting distance of Georgia. I cannot blame a Notre Dame fan for at least saying, hey, we went on the road to an elite team. Nobody else does that. Hardly anybody in the country goes and travels and plays a top 5 team. We did it, and we took them down to the final possession. I have no issue with the Notre Dame fan, especially considering their recent history doing that, and then saying, hey, at 11-1, depending on what else happens in the country.
I mean, yeah, I guess.
What are Alabama's best wins going to be? Let's say Alabama loses one game. Let's say Alabama loses to LSU and then wins the SEC. Okay, they'll beat Georgia at a neutral site. They'll beat, how good is Texas A&M? Auburn must be pretty good. And forget,
most of the games are on the road, though.
Sure, as was Notre Dame's game.
Resume at that point over Notre Dame's.
Yeah, I would too, but I certainly see other teams around the country who will be given consideration to the college football playoff. And I hate that Notre Dame doesn't play in a conference, and I think that should be held against them. They should have to do more. I'm just making the point that they're not dead. we bury a lot of teams early in the season, and we've seen it time and time again that they've come back. This is about the same week, I believe it would have been week 3 in 2014, that Ohio State lost by 2 touchdowns to Virginia Tech in a not so strong Big Ten as it was perceived at the time, and they fell to number 22 in the country. And who in the world would have thought Ohio State was going to make it to the college football playoff at number 22 in the country with a 14-point loss to Virginia Tech, who finished 7-6.
Right, but you got to look at this. Ohio State back then, they had Michigan State, which we knew was the favorite in the conference, who played Oregon pretty tight. Oregon ended up pulling away late in that game, if you remember. They had that game on the road. They had whoever they were going to match up against in the Big Ten championship, which a lot of people thought was going to be Wisconsin, and it ended up being that which top 20 team. So you could see a path back for Ohio State. Minnesota, of course, was a top 25 team that year that no one saw coming. You could see how Ohio State could get back there. For Notre Dame, you needed massive recovery from Michigan and Virginia to really give Clemson a run for their money, to have the resume, and USC, of course, to win the Pac-12 South, to have the resume to get considered to go to the playoff unless you have multiple two-loss champions. I take a one-loss conference champion out of any conference over Notre Dame with the schedule that they're going to have going forward.
Well, I would agree with you that I would take any conference champion with one loss over a Notre Dame team with one loss. But considering the status of the Pac-12 right now, that would be an argument. There would definitely be a debate within the College Football Playoff Committee if Washington State goes 12-1 against its schedule, for example, and Notre Dame sitting there at 11-1 with a loss to Georgia on the road by one score. If Washington State loses to Washington or Oregon and they lose by a touchdown or 2 scores, and trying to compare those 2 losses, because Washington State didn't play anybody in the non-conference schedule to bolster their credibility. So that would be a reasonable debate for Notre Dame against the Pac-12 champion with one loss.
Okay. I see where you're going there. But I'm going to stick behind my theory that it's more than likely not going to happen. Notre Dame keep going and playing those games, of course.
Oh, it's more than likely not going to happen. I don't disagree with you. It's more than likely not going to happen that Notre Dame goes to the college football playoff, but I'm just telling you that they're not dead.
Gotcha. All right. And the last thing I want to bring up is I'm seeing this all over media, and a lot of teams are getting looked at. I'm talking about Alabama, Georgia before today, Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma. They're getting criticized saying that they're not any good because they haven't played anyone. If you watch the game, you can tell that a team like Alabama, I got a little bit of questions about because they didn't look particularly good against South Carolina. But let's talk about Ohio State here. Vegas favored Ohio State by, I think it was like 16 against Cincinnati, beat Cincinnati by 42, 18 on the road against Indiana, I believe it was, beat them by 41, and then Vegas says, all right, we give up. Ohio State's going to dominate. We're going to make you 40-point favorites. I think it was actually 39 was the final line.
Yeah.
Nope, they win by 71. And yet, and you don't even need to talk about that, really. You just need to watch the game, and you can see Ohio State is a complete football team, and they are definitely – I don't know why everyone keeps saying this is the same Ohio State team. They're going to end up getting blown out on the road. Oh, they got Nebraska next week. They're going to get blown out on the road against Nebraska. That's what's going to happen. Did you see Nebraska tonight by any chance?
Well, first of all, what would be wrong with being the same Ohio State team that we've seen the last couple of years? I can make an easy argument that they should have been in the college football playoff last year and the year before. I do understand they got blown out one time on the road. I do understand what the easy criticism is, and they need to avoid that this year. But there's an easy argument to make that they could have been selected for the college football playoff. People need to better understand that not making the playoffs or making the playoffs isn't a complete validation of who you are or an indictment. It's not an objective system. There's a bunch of people selecting who makes the playoffs. Those teams aren't necessarily the 4 best teams. They're the teams that were selected. But I get your point about the bad loss, and that they look like they will avoid that this year. They look like that.
Well, I mean, here's what I'm going to say here about this Ohio State team. Watching them, it doesn't seem like they have any weaknesses that can get exposed to the point where they would get blown out like that. You can have a loss, of course. That can happen. Michigan State actually had a pulse on offense today. Wisconsin, we all know, is going to be very tough. Michigan is a rivalry game. Penn State, Nebraska. I can go on and on about all these tough games that Ohio State is going to have throughout their schedule. Not as tough as it looked in the preseason. But anyway, I digress. This Ohio State team is different than the last teams because they're playing better on all 3 phases of the football. They're more consistent on all 3 phases of the football. You saw Ohio State get off to a slow start today. And what did they do? It didn't carry out through the entire game. At halftime, they had 7 points in the first quarter. Let's not even talk about the second quarter. They had 42 points. That's how a championship team responds to a little bit of adversity. And that's all I got for you tonight, Mark. Thanks for doing this tonight. I really appreciate it. Glad I could catch you on the phone. Have a nice evening. I'll see you later, and I'll see you in the chat as well.
Thanks for the call, Bash. Appreciate it. Ohio State hasn't played anyone. True. Ohio State is crushing teams that other good teams will not be able to replicate. We will see in due time whether Ohio State is truly an elite team. I mentioned this week that I believe, and I distinguished this from my top 25 that actually makes sense, which is based on the games on the field. I distinguished the 5 teams that I believe are better than everybody else in college football: Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, LSU. I believe are the cream of the crop this year, and maybe the same 2, Clemson and Alabama, are even better than that tier. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McDee's Force 4.
Hey, McD, how are you, man?
Hey, I told you I was going to call tonight to talk about these games that happened today. So let's get talking. Let's get talking about it.
All right, we'll get down to it here. All right.
Okay. I actually agree with a lot of the things the last caller said, so he kind of stole my thunder a little bit. But Michigan is not going to be viewed as an impressive win this year. I think they're going to go into the Notre Dame game with at least 2 losses, possibly more. And I always say that in the preseason, I'm feeling more confident by the minute. Maryland will beat Michigan this year. I'm feeling confident about it.
Okay.
So that's point number 2. The SEC is lucky that Auburn and Georgia won their big non-conference games because the bottom of the SEC, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, I don't know what happened there at the end of the game. I don't even know if the guy was in or not in the game today. And Tennessee, especially Tennessee, are garbage. All those teams are garbage. And Florida and Kentucky aren't not that far ahead of them. And then Mississippi State.
Whoa. Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee are garbage. Okay. All right.
Okay.
You just made the claim that Florida's not that far ahead of them.
Florida's the most overrated team in football right now.
Okay.
They're not a top 10 team, and they're barely a top 25 team.
Okay, so
they will lose.
Florida played Tennessee today. They manhandled them 34-3. They've beaten who I believe are still the collection of probably the two best teams that anybody's beaten in college football, and that might have changed. That might have changed this week. Well, I'll say Auburn now. Auburn's probably beaten the two best teams with Oregon and Texas A&M. But I was making this claim for Florida last week. Yeah, I don't believe that Florida's a great team, but to call them if you're going to call Florida garbage, then 80% of the nation's garbage. Then like 110 teams are garbage.
I misspoke. Florida's over. I misspoke. Florida, by the way, will lose to Auburn. They will lose to Georgia. They will lose to LSU. And they'll probably lose to Missouri and maybe South Carolina.
Okay, I would certainly take a parlay on that myself if you were to offer that to me. I will take Florida winning at least one of those games.
They'll probably end up winning one of those games because South Carolina, I think, is a team that is going to have to pull off some upsets to make a bowl game, honestly. But I'm telling you, Florida, I was not impressed at all by Florida today. I watched that game from start to end, and I was not impressed. They turned over the ball 3 times, and they got lucky at the end of the half that they scored that touchdown. So that's just my thoughts on Florida. Auburn is legit. That's one of the other things from the SEC that I saw today. I think Auburn's a top 10 team right now. Would you agree with that?
That Auburn's a top 10 team? Yes, they are. So I had Auburn ranked before today at number 3 in the country in my top 25. That actually makes sense. In my top 25 that I just said, hey, I believe that these are the 25 best teams in the country in this order, I ranked them number 10 or 11. Yes, absolutely. They just went on the road against what I still feel is a decent Texas A&M team. I don't care what their record's going to be at the end of the year. They're still one of the 15 best teams in the country, and they beat them pretty soundly.
Correct. I think Texas A&M is going to be your best 7-5 team this year. That's what I've learned today about them. I think they're 7-5.
Okay.
I don't think they'll be Bama and on big boys. What else? UCF went down today, so that was kind of interesting. Pitt had a big win for the ACC, I guess. I mean, the ACC is garbage, but I guess Pitt had big wins for them. So that was
that's a big win.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. The big night game. Georgia will win through the SEC East, in my opinion. But LSU and Alabama, I just don't know if they could score pound to pound with them. That's the big question for me with Georgia right now in the SEC championship. Can they score pound to pound with them?
Okay. You want my response on that?
If you want to give it.
Who are we matching up?
If you match up Georgia against either Alabama or LSU, can they score pound to pound with them?
Can they stay in the game? Absolutely. Why not?
Can they score 45 points? You think they can score 45 points against them?
Why do they need to score 45 points?
Because Alabama and LSU, those are offenses. They're paying up 40 plus every game.
Not against Georgia, they're not.
I don't think. Well, this is what I think. I think the Alabama and LSU game is going to be a shootout in the 40s this year. I think it's going to be probably 45 to 38, something like that.
Okay.
And I think Georgia's going to have to at least score 35 to win the SEC championship against either one of those teams. From what I've seen from those offenses. And from what I saw tonight, I don't know if they could do that. That's my big concern about Georgia right now.
Well, again, I don't think they're going to have to do that against those teams. I think there's enough defensive talent to hold the game in check into, let's say, the 30s.
I hope you're right. That Georgia was my national championship pick. I hope you're right.
You and me.
Mm-hmm. But that's all that really I saw today. Maryland had a bye week, so didn't really get the chance to see them. But we'll see them Friday night. We'll see how they do against Penn State. But Mark, I want to let you go.
Okay, McD.
Mhm.
Sounds good. All right, man. Have a good night. Mark Rogers, TV, the voice of college football. Let's keep it going. 860-325-3687. That's 860-325-3687. Also, keep in mind that there you go. Lock it in. If you're not subscribed, please do. If you love college football, I see no reason why you wouldn't subscribe. We deliver about 120 to 150 videos per month with the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the nation, and of course, including analysis from myself. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Matt again.
Hey, Matt. How are you?
Good. So, is my American Athletic Conference better than the ACC dead after today?
No. It took a bit of a blow. Yeah, you took one on the chin, but that people that make evaluations of conferences based on one game is ridiculous. I had all sorts of people on Twitter I saw that were running around going crazy because they thought that they had immediate validation for the ACC because Pitt won a game by 1 point at home against UCF.
I agree. Especially, that's their first regular season loss in, 2.5, 3 years?
Yeah, so this automatically dismisses games where the Citadel beat Georgia Tech and North Carolina's losing to Appalachian State and NC State's losing by 17 points to West Virginia and Boston College is losing to a school in Kansas that hasn't won a Power 5 game on the road in 11 years and they lost by 24 points and Syracuse loses by 1,000,000 points to Maryland and on and Miami's beating Central Michigan by 5 points. I still have to look at that. I'm going to watch the condensed version to see if I can even believe what I'm watching, that Central Michigan loses by 61 points to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin's really good, but I don't think any of us believe that they're like a national championship caliber team. And then Central Michigan loses to Miami by 5 points, and that's just beginning on the ACC. We still haven't gotten into Virginia Tech and Florida State. It's just nobody's any good in that league. Virginia might be okay.
The second best team.
Yep.
Yeah, barely beats Old
looks
Dominion,
like it.
though. Struggle with them.
Yep. It's a horrible league.
And yeah, it is. I have those conference rankings if you want them. I left them in a comment section, but they've changed since this morning, obviously.
Oh, okay. Well, what's changed since this morning? Obviously, UCF lost, but are they necessarily not still the best team?
They're still one. SMU made a big jump.
Oh,
they made
yeah,
a
sure.
2 or 3 spot jump.
Yep.
I wasn't sure about their defense, if their defense could hold up against TCU, but it was good enough, especially with Bouchel. I knew him as a Texas fan, so he's not really doing anything that I'd expect him to do. He's a good quarterback.
Yeah.
And then also, do you think this is the most wide open it's been in college football in the past half decade? Because I do. I don't think there's a dominant team this year so far. That's
a great comment. I would have to see a little bit more, but based on what we've seen, I still would be surprised if anybody outside of 6 teams make the college football playoff. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma. Where was I? Is that 5? LSU.
That's 5.
There's 5 or 6 teams. Like I said at the beginning of the season, I said, we've watched 6 teams basically dominate the sport over the last 5 years. I know a lot of people point to 2, but if you're looking at college football playoff spots, the same teams are vying for them. Oklahoma's owned the Big 12. Ohio State's owned the Big 10, Clemson the ACC, and now Georgia's kind of worked their way into the SEC mix just based as a elite team. Obviously, they've only won it once, and then the Pac-12 has been somewhat dismissed. And that's pretty much been our formula ever since the playoffs started, just with basically Clemson taking over for Florida State. That's been the formula. That's it.
Yeah, I would probably say Ohio State, and it hurts me to say, but Oklahoma looked the best so far, but they haven't played anyone. Two callers before said Ohio State looks different. I agree, they look really good, but the thing is, the one thing you don't see is how Fields reacts in pressure situations, under pressure in the pocket, under pressure in the game, because none of those teams are going to be able to do that to him.
Yeah, I kind of had to laugh. I read the recap on the Ohio State game, and Justin Fields made a comment about them facing some adversity in the first half when they were down, 5-0. And I was like, okay, whoa, hang on. You're going to Nebraska. You're going to see Penn State. You're going to Michigan State. Just hang on, buddy. Just you're going to see some adversity. That was not the adversity. If you're thinking that was the adversity you're going to face this year, you may want to reevaluate, because you're going to get hit in the mouth here at some point.
Yeah. And then how does someone do their job so badly? Recruiting sites rated Hunter Johnson ahead of Tua. What the hell happened there?
Okay, I think point well taken, but at the same time, Matt, understand that for a couple years, Hunter Johnson was on campus throwing to the likes of fill in the blank at Clemson. The amazing skill position players and talent that he had working around him in practice. And then he goes to Northwestern, where they just have a void, a dearth of offensive explosive skill players. They just have a bunch of like slot receivers. They got little guys that are slot receivers, and then they got big guys who are basically glorified tight ends. They don't have any separation ability. Northwestern, that has been the one thing that has kept them from playing much better football than they have. I credit them for being as strong a program as they've become under Pat Fitzgerald. But to watch that team, and it's especially magnified this season, they have nothing on offense around him.
Yeah, I thought Bowser was going to be a little bit better this year, but he hasn't been that good so far.
Well, they played a dominant defense today, and as expected, they couldn't do anything.
Yeah, if Michigan State had a quarterback, they'd probably win 10 or 11 games.
Yeah, a quarterback, and again, they've got a couple decent receivers, but they're really not that good. Cody White and Darryl Stewart, they're decent. Their offensive line isn't that good. They don't have a game-changing kind of running back, or like some of the elite teams have 2 or 3 guys that are just really elite, explosive players. They just, again, Michigan State's much better, as they proved today, than Northwestern, but they don't have those kind of players on offense.
And then what was Michigan trying to do today? Because I watched half that game and I just gave up after at halftime, because they can stop if you can't stop Jonathan Taylor, you have no shot of winning, and they couldn't stop him.
Yes, if there's a classic example of selling out for the run and it actually being a reasonable game plan, then Michigan should have incorporated that today. Not that Wisconsin can't throw it, but make them throw it.
Yeah.
And the plays where Taylor really got loose, the Michigan linebacking core was just a bit clueless in regards to just basic gap integrity. They over pursued.
Yeah, twice, big time.
Yeah, he really did. He got sucked in. When you've got 7 guys in the box, and you're Lavert Hill, and there's nothing but grass to your left or right, you have to know. I've played enough leverage football in my day. He's got to be thinking to himself that, hey, if he churns through those 7 guys, I couldn't do anything about that. Hey, if he's able to get through that, I gotta stay out here and make sure he doesn't bounce this. But Lavert Hill kept getting sucked in a couple times, as you mentioned, and then Jonathan Taylor's off to the races. Other times, the linebackers were right behind the linemen. They were getting sucked up into, over pursuing and going down into the flow of the play right behind the linemen, not staying gap integrity back a couple yards and reading the play and filling those gaps, and bam, Taylor's off to the races. Yeah, it was just a poor display on every conceivable level on both sides of the ball for Michigan. It was pathetic.
Yeah, and it was.
Yeah, it was
kind of like weird to me to see them getting like whipped around up front. Like Wisconsin obviously has a great offensive line, but I mean, you have way more talent on your defensive line and way more talent on your offensive line, supposedly star-wise, if you just want to rank recruiting. But I mean, obviously, I think they've been coached up better at Wisconsin.
For sure, Matt.
So I'm going to let you go. Do you want me to leave these American Athletic Conference rankings in one of your comment sections, or what do you want me to do with it?
Yeah, just do that. I'll be able to find it. I can go to a page that just lists all my comments, and I will find them. And I hope to get to that this week. I've got an extremely busy week on the personal side, and of course, I want to preview all the big games coming up on Saturday.
Yeah, no problem. Get to it when you can.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. The American Conference versus the ACC. I'm so locked into the Power Five, and I love Group of Five football, especially on Thursday and Friday night. It's when I try to catch those games. Just obviously, when there's 130 teams, you got 60, 65 games every week. I can't watch everybody play and keep up with it, so I've got to focus on the Power Five. But I love the Group of Five. But once Matt brought that up, the American Conference versus the ACC, I think it is a very worthy project to dissect the seedings from those two conferences and match them up. Mark Rogers, TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
What's up, Marcus? DeAndre, man, how you doing?
Hey, DeAndre, how are you, man?
Good, man. I enjoyed the games today.
Did you?
Chapel Hill.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was doing some work up there, and all these Carolina fans, there were probably just as many App fans in there as there was Carolina fans in there. Now, I know Carolina doesn't have a strong football history since the 40s, but the little schools like East Carolina and App State, they get kind of hyped when they get to play Carolina, and Carolina's terrible. Carolina's sort of like Ohio State and Michigan and the state of North Carolina. So I thought about that. I don't think Carolina was going to win. So that was kind of interesting. I took the over in that game. But unfortunately, I picked Michigan to beat Wisconsin, and that killed my parlay ticket right there.
I hear you. I picked Michigan to win as well, and I watched the first couple drives of that game, and I'm thinking, Mark, what were you thinking? Even though Michigan had a bye week, had 2 weeks to fix problems, has better athletes supposedly on the field, I just thought you should know that this Michigan team is not proving to be any different. They're weak-minded, they're undisciplined, they're ill-prepared, and Wisconsin is just rock solid. Rock solid. That team is focused, tough, don't make mistakes. That's a typical Wisconsin. That's a typical good Wisconsin team, the type of Wisconsin team that wins 10 or 11 games. And yeah, may not be quite to the LSU, Georgia, Ohio State level, but really good.
Right. So yeah, but like I said, I enjoyed the day. Jimbo Fisher rocked A&M with their buddy. Michigan lost, overrated again. I don't know how I fell into that trap. I should have went with Wisconsin or something because I should have known. But like one of the guys I was driving around today, he said we always say that after the bets are done.
That's right.
We should have known, but it was too late to change it. But Texas and Oklahoma State hurt me. I thought they were going to score at least 73 points. I didn't end up scoring 66.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to see the game, but man, I would pick wrestle with you about Twitter. I heard what you said about me picking saying that the ACC is better than was it American? That's where what's it called play at Central Florida. And I know it's just one. I know it's just one game. I was just saying that Central Florida lost to an ACC school finally. I don't think it's fair they don't get a chance to play in the Final Four, whatever we call it, the bowl championship series. I think they should have a shot just like everybody else, but the rules are the rules, and unfortunately that's how it goes. But I wish all those other schools would play. I know Central Florida is like, well, I don't want to do 2 home games at your place and 1 at ours, but just go out there and play them and see what happens. Or those schools should require that. I don't think Miami requires it because Miami they went to App State and Arkansas State. So I don't know if Miami has reached out to Central Florida to schedule a home with them, but I know Miami goes everywhere to play everybody. So I mean they still might lose by 100 points to Central Florida, but at least they give it a shot. And I was I think you talked to us sometimes. Two live certain Miami. He was saying that he was talking to him on his radio show, his podcast, and I was telling him earlier in the year I thought Virginia would win the conference. I know they ain't look good against Old Dominion tonight, and I know they end up winning the game, but I told people like, yo, Old Dominion gives everybody a hard time. I don't know because of the style of play they play, but they gave Virginia a hard time tonight. But that offensive line, and I said it under Mark Rick, is not good to me at Miami. I don't know what it is about that offensive line, but this looks absolutely terrible to me. And that left tackle they got, I saw parts of the Central Michigan game. He ran around him twice and sacked the quarterback. They even had a safety for a sack. So I just don't think their offensive line is any good. And they had to play Clemson, man, in an ACC championship game. They absolutely gonna get burned. That's why I didn't pick Miami to win it. And Nebraska's another team that I just never had no trust in. I mean, did they lose to Illinois tonight? It was 35-27 last time I checked.
They were up 42-38 with 2 minutes left. Let me double check on that score.
So they came back.
Yeah, Nebraska won 42-38, but they just beat the second worst team in the conference by 4.
I know Illinois is bad, but sometimes they give you signs. I think they blew out Minnesota last year.
Yes,
sometimes
they did.
They give you signs of life, and then sometimes they're like, well, and unfortunately, I hear that Illinois doesn't put no money into their program. I heard it's still compared to everybody else around the country, I heard it's at the bottom of the totem pole as far as facilities go.
True.
I mean, yeah, so, and who wants to go to Champaign in the middle of the cold? But people go to Wisconsin, though. But, I mean, I just enjoy the season, man. I can't wait. I hope a dream matchup happens. I want to see Georgia versus Ohio State in one of the semifinals.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I want to see who was better, from or Ohio State. Ohio State is whooping everybody right now. I can't wait for Ohio State and Wisconsin to match up in the Big Ten championship game. I don't think anybody can run with them in Wisconsin in the West.
So DeAndre, you don't have to wait for the Big Ten championship game. They're playing this season in a few weeks.
Oh, where they playing at?
Columbus.
Oh, okay. Wow, I can't wait then. I ain't think they played this year, but okay, cool, man. That's gonna be a hell of a game, man. You don't go to it. That team gonna be outrageous.
Yeah, it should be a good ball game. Look forward to it. And like you, I would love to see some of those elite teams face off. Some kind of a Georgia-Clemson matchup, a Georgia-Ohio State. I know that my Final Four was Clemson matching up with Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia.
Right. Well, unfortunately, I everybody. I mean, I know it was a regional game, but everybody still can't figure out why Clemson and Georgia don't play anymore. I mean, I know it's like I tell people, ESPN was on that big old cable box back in the day. I don't know what your lifestyle was, but we only had 13 channels when I was coming up in the 80s and 90s. So I didn't get a chance to see Miami and them until later on in my lifetime, unless they played the New Year's Bowl. And Clemson and Georgia was a big game back then, and at least in the regional area. And I can't understand why they don't play anymore and on a consistent basis. I know they got a 3-game series coming up, but to me, they should play every year. I mean, I know you told me one time before that would be board schedule for Clemson because they play South Carolina at the end of the year already, and Georgia. I'll let you go, boy, but I do got one question for you, and it's kind of a tongue twister. I heard Jimbo Fisher talk about, a lot of us complain about, the big guys not playing and they playing the little guys. But Jimbo Fisher said in his comments, he said, well, everybody's not Division I football players. So if you don't have a Division II, Division III, or, the lower ones, you might dry up the pool of players. And it was straight football if you don't help those little schools out. What do you think about that?
Wait, let me get this straight again. Jimbo Fisher is saying what about Division II and III football players?
Division II, like Lamar, Texas State,
Sure.
schools like that. I don't know what the proper name to call them, but Jimbo Fisher says he don't support those schools
Okay.
and play them and give them money to play them. It will shrink the pool of football players.
Well, absolutely it will.
That you would have because everybody not Division I players, and those smaller schools give other athletes a chance to go to college and play and get an education. That's what it was saying.
Sure. Well, the situation, DeAndre, is that football is both the most lucrative sport, but it's also the most costly sport. So for those schools like all the teams that we watch on TV, they're making the most money off of football, and football is supporting the rest of the athletic program. Football, then basketball, and for very few schools, baseball. But basically, football is paying the bill for everybody else. But for the low end of football play in the FCS and below that, NAIA, they have football basically just as a prestige factor for the university. The football actually costs the university money because nobody goes to the games, because even the people that go to the games are paying $5. So all the travel and all the food and all the accommodations and all the facilities that have to be maintained and built and all the everything that goes into running a football program, because you've got so many players involved and coaches, that's a huge expense for most universities. We think of all the big schools and all the millions of dollars they make. Well, the majority of teams that play football across the country, it's costing hundreds of thousands of dollars for them to maintain a football team, and they don't make anything, hardly anything. So if they would decide, let's make a financial decision, and stop playing football because we could put our $800,000 towards something else because nobody cares about our football team. We get 300 people at the game. Then there would be less people playing football. There would be less opportunities for guys that are just wanting to play football, extend their high school careers, and learn all the great lessons that you learn playing college athletics. Yeah, those opportunities would be gone if there weren't situations like Texas A&M giving Lamar $1 million to play a football game.
Right. But that's it, Mark, man. You have a great night. I'm out here working, so we'll get back to it, man. Thank you for taking my phone call, man.
Thanks, DeAndre. You have a great weekend. All right, UCLA, Washington State. The Cougars have a nice little lead here in the second half, 49-17, with about 4 minutes left in the third quarter. And, of course, Washington State, number 19 in the country, undefeated right now. Probably their best game to date has been a win over Houston. where Houston hung around in that game. Trying to think who else. I may have screwed this up. We'll see.
The call will start.
All right, Mark Riders TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, it's Chris, Mark. How's it going?
Hey, Chris, how are you?
All right, man. It's a great day of college football. UCF fan, and watch my team lose, but it was a good run. I just wanted to start off today talking about the Wisconsin-Michigan game, first of all.
Okay.
After watching that game today, I can't imagine, unless Wisconsin has injuries all along their offensive and defensive fronts, that anybody can compete with them for 4 quarters. If they just decide to smash them, if they decide to run the ball down somebody's throat, I can't imagine anybody being able to stop them for 4 quarters.
Well, Nebraska certainly doesn't have the defensive personnel to handle Wisconsin. Iowa might. You with us, Chris?
I don't know. Okay, I can hear you now. You're saying Iowa?
I said that Iowa might have the defensive personnel to get it done. Now, everybody's or a lot of people's preseason pick in the Big Ten West, Nebraska certainly does not have the defensive personnel or mindset or scheme on defense based on what we've seen this year to deal with Wisconsin. But Iowa, I would have a reasonable trust in Iowa to be able to withstand that kind of onslaught of a rushing attack, because Iowa's very stout on all levels of defense.
Yeah, they really got some guys up there. The second thing I was thinking, I've listened to some of your videos in the past where you talk about changing up college, how college football is run and setting up better matchups and everything. And I was just thinking about this today as I was watching some of these matchups and the Georgia game this afternoon. I feel as though if teams didn't feel like they had to be perfect in order to get in, we would have better matchups more often. What do you think about that?
Well, if we simply had an objective system where teams actually knew what they had to do to make the playoff, that would help. And also expanding the playoffs, not in a crazy way, but expanding it, understanding that 35% of the NFL makes the playoffs. Roughly 35% of Major League Baseball, 50% of the NBA makes the playoffs. I would not propose anything close to that. But right now we are talking about 4 teams out of 130 that make the playoffs. If we doubled that, we are still talking about the very elite, very cream of the crop of college football making the playoff. 8 out of 130. It's like 6%. And it would give representation, not equal representation, but it would at least give representation to all of the Power 5, because the way things stand right now, they do not play each other enough for us to make a reasonable evaluation or judgment as to how good the conferences are. Therefore, how good are the teams that won the conference? So I would build a scheduling formula.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen those videos, but I have built a scheduling formula that would be fair and equitable.
Yeah, I'd actually like to see the Power 5 and the Group of 5, and this is coming from a UCF fan, actually kind of split where they had their own championships. So the Group of 5 can have something to play for, and the Power 5 can have more of those matchups where they play each other more, so they don't. Well, the funny thing about it is there's been more Power 5 teams I've seen losing to these small schools. I don't know what's going on this year, but I generally think, Power 5's playing a Power 5 schedule would be more interesting to watch week after week. Just playing other Power 5 opponents.
The only drawback we have to Power 5s playing Power 5s all the time and never playing a lower tier Group of 5 or playing an FCS is, number one, as our previous caller mentioned, that the FCS schools need the financial backing of the Power 5 schools to survive, number one. And number two, just the injury factor of having to play 12 consecutive games against like talent and having the intensity of those kind of games week in, week out. I have no issue with the occasional FCS game, one on the schedule for everyone, and maybe a group of 5 game. But when the SEC and the ACC have 4 non-conference games and the likes of Alabama can only schedule a Duke, and then the other 3 games are Kent State and New Mexico State and Arkansas State, it's just beyond ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there some of the SEC. The SEC really, I think, is probably the worst about that. But then I give them a pass because they're I mean, in the SEC playing that schedule is pretty tough. Even though this year the bottom is really bad. So. And one more question. Who do you think, if there was matchup between Ohio State and Oklahoma, who would you favor in that matchup? I would love to see that. I think they're very similar.
Well, that would have been a nice matchup to see last year, of course, because those were the 2 teams that deserved the 4th spot in the playoffs, both with 1 loss and a conference championship. I certainly felt as though Ohio State was much more capable on defense, even though they had their issues last year, and Oklahoma was slightly more explosive on offense because of Kyler Murray. But the offensive personnel on both teams were, off the charts. This year, based on what I've seen thus far and based on what I know of the talent on each roster, I would say Ohio State is a better team than Oklahoma. I cut a video this week and I stated, based on what I've seen and based on what I know of these teams, I think there are 5 teams that are better than everybody else in the country. And I think it's Alabama, Clemson, LSU, Georgia, and Ohio State.
Wow, I'm surprised you don't think Wisconsin is close to that?
I didn't say that they're not close. Of course, you got to understand something. I made those statements and those rankings prior to seeing Wisconsin play Michigan. And also, let's understand that, yes, I still don't believe that Wisconsin's in that tier. I'm not going to take this blowout of Michigan, especially considering all the issues Michigan is having, and put Wisconsin on that level. I want to see them play through the schedule. I want to see them play teams that we don't consider to be as good as Michigan, but that will be that they are going to have their struggles this year. They're going to face some adversity. They're going to find some teams to be very difficult to play, especially on the road. Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio State, of course. That's going to be fascinating to watch those 2 teams on the same field. But no, I would not put Wisconsin on that level, but that doesn't mean that they're not. That just is my opinion currently. Now let's separate 2 things here, Chris. Do I believe that they've earned that or deserve that based on what they've shown on the field? Absolutely. Their resume is excellent, but I just don't believe, based on my gut, based on what I know of the talent on the roster, that they're as good as Ohio State or those other teams.
Yeah, see, that's why I like to hear both your top 25 that makes sense, and then the when you did the other one this week where you just picked your top teams.
Well,
as far as how you thought.
Yeah, so I appreciate that you understand what I'm trying to do and what the difference is. If Purdue played a really tough non-conference game in week 1 and they played Texas and beat them, that wouldn't necessarily change my opinion of Purdue, but I shouldn't be able to have that much of a say over what teams are ranked. I think it should be based on what they've shown us on the field. So Florida's a great example. I don't think Florida's that good. I think I rated them 17th in the country, but I think based on what they've done on the field, they have earned a much higher ranking than that. They have now beaten Kentucky, Miami, and Tennessee, decidedly now Tennessee, and they've racked up some decent wins, and they've earned a much higher than number 17 ranking. But in my heart and in my head, I don't think Florida State or Florida is much better than a top 15 team in the country.
I like that this week. Are you going to do any more of that?
Sure, I can do that every week if people want to listen to that. I don't necessarily know if a lot of people can differentiate the two, even though I try to explain it as much as I possibly can. But sure.
I think it's interesting, especially where we have all these teams that seem to be playing. There's a lot of teams that are playing uneven football. They look great, and they come out, and I was really surprised at what USC did to Utah, and then BYU. I thought when they played Utah the first game of the year, I thought BYU was going to be okay, but I mean, then BYU looks amazing for a couple of weeks, and I have no idea what to expect.
Yeah, BYU's an interesting team. I was a bit suckered by the effort against Tennessee and USC, and my mind was telling me Washington's a superior team. They're going to go in there and take care of business. But I was thinking, wow, BYU has really put together a couple nice games here. Not that they played that well at Tennessee. They kind of lucked into a win. They took advantage. I don't want to say they lucked. They made plays. The opportunity was there for them to win it late. But they obviously showed that playing three consecutive teams of that caliber, and when I say Tennessee, I know people are going to jump on me about the Tennessee caliber, but they still have SEC athletes, that I think it took its toll on BYU, and they just couldn't raise their game to that level for a third consecutive week.
Does BYU have the kind of schedule that would ever be able to get into the playoffs?
That's a fascinating comment, Chris, because I make that distinction each and every year during the off season. I don't know how long you've been watching me, but I rank all the schedules. So I go through all the Power Five and I rank the schedules from 70 all the way up to number 1. And I make the same comment about BYU every year. They have the oddest, strangest, most lopsided schedule of any team in the country, because what happens is they're not Notre Dame. So they can't just go out and schedule whomever they want, whenever they want. So what happens is they really stack their schedule early against elite programs in September before those teams start playing conference games. So you'll notice their September schedule is always loaded. They usually have 3 really good Pac-12 teams, and then they'll play somebody like a Tennessee, like a Mississippi State, somebody out of the SEC. They played Michigan State a few years ago. They'll play 5 games that are really tough, and usually 4 right out of the gate. And then once early October hits, they can't find anybody to play. So they're basically just looking for bye weeks. And, they've played the likes of Liberty, Wagner. The last 6 or 7 weeks of their season is just a hodgepodge of teams across the country. New Mexico State. They may be able to find like a Boise State to play. That's a decent game. But otherwise, they play generally the weakest schedule in the country the last 6 to 7 games of the season, after they played almost the most difficult schedule in the country for the first 4 weeks.
I guess if they ever go 4-0, see how they ever rank early in the year.
Yeah, they would be an interesting case if they ever went undefeated. That they would be an interesting case, an argument.
All right, Mark. Well, have a good night, and thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for the call, Chris. I appreciate it. All right, we have passed the 1 o'clock hour Eastern Time. Mark Riders TV, the voice of college football. I only was able to release one instant analysis. I usually hit about 5 or 6 throughout the day on Saturday, but took a little family time and just didn't get around to watching. I've got so many games on DVR right now. It's crazy. I believe, based on what I'm hearing, that UCLA is putting on some kind of a grand comeback in this game. I'll have to check it out. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's NBA fan.
How's it going, man?
Good, how are you?
Okay. Yes, what do you have for us?
Okay. So, I was just thinking about OSU's recruiting while watching their games so far this season. And they've recruited really well at receiver so far into Ryan Day's tenure, right?
Yes.
And I feel like that's coming right after Dwayne Haskins was the best pocket passer probably in Ohio State history. But now with Justin Fields and him as a passer and as he's developing, right, he's passing for around 220, 230 yards. And I don't know if he stays at the same level that he's at in his career, will we still be able to attract that same receiver talent where they see that they might not be utilized at the level that they might want to be used at based on Justin Fields' skill set? What do you think about that?
I think yes. I understand your concern. I understand your viewpoint, but look at what Georgia does through the air and how limited they are. Look at what Ohio State did under JT Barrett and the quarterbacks that preceded him in terms of a limited passing attack. Look at what Urban Meyer did at Florida in regards to not passing the ball for any prolific yardage and touchdown totals and still recruiting and signing elite talent. Look at what LSU has done for many years under Les Miles and now Ed Ogeron, even though they revamped the offense this year in bringing in guys like Jarvis Landry and DJ Chark and Odell Beckham Jr. and on and on and on, Mark Clayton and those kind of players at LSU. So, yeah, a school like Ohio State's not going to have any issue bringing in top-notch NFL talented wide receiver, especially since they're still going to throw the ball and throw it prolifically, just maybe not to the degree that they did under Dwayne Haskins.
Right. So, for Ohio State to recruit at the highest level at all skill positions, including running back and receiver together, in the same year, what type of offense do you think they would need to run to attract both of those type talents at running back and receiver at the highest level that will make them feel like they're both going to be utilized to the level that satisfies them in the Ohio State offense?
Well,
how big of a change that would be from what they're doing right now?
Well, I don't think it would be much of a change because they run a balanced offense in terms of run-pass ratio, so that's the number one consideration. Obviously, you don't want to run an offense that is too heavy on one side, like a Washington State. Washington State's not going to attract high-level elite running backs because they don't run the ball enough, and they don't run that kind of offense that would make it attractive for somebody to go there and show themselves off for NFL scouts, but Ohio State does. The one consideration that I would make for Ohio State in terms of showcasing running back talent would be obviously those guys are primary receivers in the NFL, and maybe incorporating the running back into the passing game more might be something that if they're really thinking about having issues attracting top level running backs at Ohio State, that they would want to do. But I don't think it's a concern.
So when you look at the rosters of OSU and Georgia, what would you point out as the weaknesses for both rosters, and which roster would you say has the most weaknesses?
Did you say has the biggest weakness? Which roster?
Or the most weaknesses. So you could say that Georgia has a lot of like talent in terms of pass rushers, but they don't have like an elite pass rush. You see what I'm saying? Or championship level pass rush. So what would you say are like the weaknesses of both Ohio State and Georgia, and they would hinder them when trying to chase a championship?
I think that the biggest difference between Ohio State and Georgia's rosters is that Georgia has an elite offensive line and Ohio State has yet to prove that they do. And that Ohio State's biggest issue, they've had really two big issues in matching up against the best teams over the last 3 or 4 years. And that's been linebacker play that's been substandard. And sometimes that's been because of the scheme, but it's often been times that they haven't had the elite speed at linebacker that they've needed, and they've gotten lost in pass coverage, and they've been unable to make open field tackles against good running backs and against jet sweeps and those kind of plays. So the linebacker position at Ohio State, from the time Raekwon McMillan and that group left in 2016 for the next couple of seasons, has not been near the level that they needed to be. And also the offensive line has been good, but not elite at Ohio State like it has been at Georgia, especially this Georgia team.
Okay, so when you analyze, the college football decision from last year over who would come in the fourth slot,
Yes.
do you think that like Ohio State showed the greater aptitude to perform in big games based off of their performances against ranked teams on their schedule last year? Like, rather than, I don't feel like that loss versus Purdue. I mean, of course you shouldn't, like that hinders your ability to get in, right? But I mean, I feel like that's not indicative of their talent or their potential to perform in big games, right? I feel like their seasons, like Ohio State as a whole, they either played down or they played down or they played up to their competition last year. And they had everything. They had the coach, they had the talent, they had everything to rise to the occasion in a big game.
Yeah, the playoff committee has gotten hung up on the bad loss, and the bad loss is what it is. So I certainly can't defend Ohio State going out and losing by 31 points to Iowa the previous season or losing by 29 points to Purdue. But to your point, for some reason, the bad loss has become more of a negative than beating good teams, and beating them soundly has become a positive, because Ohio State the previous season, in matching up against Alabama for the fourth spot, had a much, much stronger overall resume of beating good teams and beating them soundly, i.e. Penn State, Michigan State. And let's see, in 2017, those are the three teams that come to mind. There was somebody else versus what Alabama posted. And then last season, I would argue that Ohio State had better wins against better teams than Oklahoma did. But of course, they had the one loss, and they did not have the opportunity to avenge the loss. Certainly, if Purdue would have made it to the Big Ten championship game and Ohio State would have taken care of them, as we all would have most likely predicted, then you've got a different scenario. Oklahoma was lucky enough to be playing the team that they lost to.
Right. So the last couple of questions, Eric. So when looking at both of the Big Ten and the Big 12 conferences, which one would you say better prepared their top team for what they'll face when facing the best teams in the nation from other conferences, most specifically like in the playoffs? Would you say it's like a Big Ten where you're going to have, I'm not saying this is true in all cases, but the reputation is like for better defense, things like that, or the Pac-12, the Big 12, where you have more dynamic offenses, which is what all the best teams have?
Well, it depends on what specific teams you're talking about in the Big Ten, because I think Ohio State continues to distinguish it.
Like Michigan State.
Yeah.
Michigan State.
Yeah, so Ohio State's distinguished itself as the premier program in the Big Ten with the best talent by far. It's decidedly better than everybody else. So, yeah, you kind of have to separate Ohio State when you start talking about.
You think they're decidedly better than Michigan? I mean, Michigan's been recruiting like top 10 classes as well. You know
Sure.
I see what you're saying. Like, Ohio State does have the edge, but I mean, I don't know how big it actually is. You know what I'm saying? I feel like they're like top end talent. It's not miles ahead of Michigan. You know.
So I've said a number of times that Ohio State is recruited better than Michigan. They have a more talented roster than Michigan, and it really can't be debated. But it's not unreasonably large of a gap. As you mentioned, Ohio State's recruited top 5 classes. Michigan's recruited top 10 to 12 classes. But if you stack them up against each other, it's a decided advantage, but it's not enormous. I think that's a fair statement.
Right. Okay. So, my last question then, or one of them, I think. So, when comparing, like, okay, so here's the first collab. So, this question is about, like, Ryan Day's career, and we understand he's, like, an offensive-minded coach. Do you think that he should follow, like, what's the Clemson coach's name? That whole Sweeney model of, since he's an offensive guy, hiring, like, a right-hand man on defense, that you can trust and rely on to, like, take care of that side of the ball while you worry about the offensive side of the ball more during your career as a coach? Or how do you think that he should go about handling the defensive side of the ball? Do you think he should try to stick his nose in it, or what's your opinion on that?
Well, there's no question that every head coach has a certain side of the ball that they've focused on throughout their careers and ascending to the level that they have and getting the big job. And for Ryan Day, yes, he's a master coordinator of offense in the passing game and play calling. And so, as a coach who's not only the CEO, first time CEO of a program like Ohio State, he's also still calling the plays. He has plenty on his plate to not get involved with the defense. He's taking on more than the typical head coach, and he's doing it as a first-year head coach. So he needs to stay out of the defensive room unless he sees something. I think as a head coach who has awareness and understands big picture issues, if he sees a systematic problem, then he could certainly get involved in the defense. But that's not something that he wants to get involved in day to day.
Right. And he's got like 2 other great offensive minds on his coaching staff, to where you think he'd have no problem, like, really divvying off the responsibilities of play calling off to them. They're both, like, experienced and successful in play calling, you know? What's your opinion on that? Like Mike Yurcich and Kevin Wilson, they both have had, like, wild success while calling plays in their careers.
Well, to date, it's working rather well. I don't know how they balance that, those opinions in the room, but Ryan Day, despite the presence of those 2 coaches, still is taking on the play calling in addition to doing what he's doing as the head coach. So that's a decision that he's made, that he wants to see if he can handle it all. And it's apparently working.
So, last question, right? How do you see Ryan Day's career at Ohio State going, and how do you see it eventually ending? We know that he's, like, grown up in Massachusetts, and that's near where the Patriots is played. Do you see Ohio State being sort of like a final destination and spending, like, multiple decades here, or in getting like sort of bored with the challenge of Ohio State and moving to the like prim of football coaching jobs in the world, which would be the Patriots after Belichick retires.
So you're talking about Ryan Day moving on to the NFL.
Right.
So what you're asking me to do is to get into the heart and mind of a particular person that I don't know. So I have no idea what Ryan Day's long-term aspirations are. For some coaches, like a Coach K at Duke, it's to be a great all-time legend and to continue to build that legacy at one school, at one place, and not take an offer from the next level. For a Ryan Day, it may be something different. For a Lincoln Riley, it may be something different. I have no idea what Ryan Day's aspirations are. And for many of us, aspirations change as we get older and become something we didn't imagine them to be, or situations worsen at a place where we think at one point that we would want to stay forever. So I have no idea.
Okay, and last question. This is really the last one. All right. So, do you see like Ryan Day? How do you see like Ohio State like going into the future? Do you see them having like? Do you see them having just like steady losses of like 6 to 10 points multiple times, rather than them just looking great and then just falling off a cliff like they did with Urban Meyer? And they said that Ryan Day seems more like an even kill person. He doesn't, like he doesn't move with the tides or whatever, go up and down, they don't win or loss or something like that. Do you think that that will play into him not losing like by 30 or something like that?
So the probabilities state that if you have an elite team, an elite program, when you do lose games, you're not going to lose them by much. I think that even what happened to Ohio State the last 2 years were somewhat of an aberration. So no, as long as Ryan Day keeps Ohio State's program at a certain level, I do not expect them to be losing by 30 and 35 points to the likes of Iowa and Purdue. Well, thanks for the call, man. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye. All right. I think we will shut it down at 1:33 a.m. I could take some more calls. I apologize if I did not get to your comment. I'm probably, let's see, the last comment I posted there from Anthony was at 1:20, so about 13 minutes ago. And I will take one more call, and it's going to be very quick. So whomever's on the line, I apologize. I am not... don't quite have the patience that I did 25 or 30 minutes ago. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Michael Hoke, how you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing just fine, Michael. What do you have for us?
Not much. I just wanted to get your opinion about the Nebraska-Illinois game tonight and how Nebraska was trailing for most of the night and stuff like that. Were you surprised about that, or do you think they just wore Illinois out, and especially with Adrian Martinez having almost 500-yard total offense by himself?
Okay, what I think is that Illinois is awful defensively. They have some skilled players, especially Reggie Corbin at running back, that will give a lot of teams trouble. Nebraska had a horrible defense for most of last season. That's been upgraded to a certain extent, but I do not expect them to have a very good defense this year. We've already seen that against South Alabama and especially against Colorado, so I'm not surprised that Nebraska gave up a ton of points. And had some issues on the road against Illinois. This is the first game that Scott Frost has actually won on the road. So that's, despite it being at Illinois, is an accomplishment for the program. But this is what Nebraska is right now. They're a dynamic offensive team with Adrian Martinez and with a wealth of running backs and wide receivers who scare defenses, with a decent offensive line. Decent, I'm being a little bit kind. And spots on the defense that have some playmakers, but overall a defense that's one of the worst 3 to 4 defenses in the Big Ten.
Another thing I'm trying to figure out is they had 4 fumbles tonight. They have 9 on the season. What do you think it is, especially with Martinez? It looks like he's I was at the game tonight, and it looked like he just keeps the ball wide open. I mean, has he learned? I mean, is it just his style of running, or why is he not keeping it tucked in?
Most likely it's his style of running because they've yet to play a defense that really focuses on stripping the ball or making huge defensive plays.
Okay, hey, Mark, have a great weekend, man.
Thank you so much for the call, Michael. I appreciate it. All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Tomorrow we will have our top 25 that actually makes sense, and I've had a request to actually release another top 25 as I did last week, where I basically share who I believe are the 25 best teams in the country. Completely different than the top 25 that actually makes sense with the 25 teams that have the best resumes. I've been frustrated by, you ever let your TV go to sleep and it has that annoying message that if you press any key to watch TV, and so you've got a gray screen? That's what I have had for the last probably hour during this Washington State UCLA game, and I could not get the right angle on the cable box to get it to show me the picture. So I hear this tremendous UCLA comeback, but I have not been able to watch any of it. I would like to remind everybody out there of a few things. This is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We would love to do this full time. So we have a number of revenue streams in which we are pursuing. And so please help us there. You can help us by liking the videos, sharing the videos, subscribing. James Scott, if you're still on the line, I thank you so much wholeheartedly for reminding people constantly to like the videos. It is not that difficult. And we've got 61 on the line. By the time we put this thing to bed, we will have 500 to 1,000 views, and then eventually we'll have more than that, because for some reason people like to watch these days later and even weeks later, believe it or not. So we will have several thousand views on this video, and the likes should almost match the number of views. So I appreciate it, James, you in particular, George, and others who have encouraged people to like the videos. If you go to betnow.eu and you use the promo code and the link that is in the description section, that will be there once the video posts, but it's not there right now, but it's in the description section of any of the videos that you see online on my channel. Grab that link, you sign up, you will be given 100% bonus, meaning if you put $100 in, you'll get $200. So you're playing from in front of the sticks. And if you use the promo code MRTVCFB. Also, Christmas is coming, folks. Please help out the channel. Help us build the channel. Use the link in the description section below. Again, of any of the videos, the Amazon link that you will find in any of the videos in the description section, copy and paste that link. Put it somewhere where you can use it. Sorry, I'm not taking any more calls. It's 1:45 in the morning. Grab any link. Now, I'm totally off kilter now, listening to this phone go crazy. All right. Christmas is coming. People are going to be shopping at Amazon. If you shop at Amazon, please grab the link on any of the videos next to the Amazon description. Grab that link. It goes to Amazon. You do your regular Amazon shopping just like you do with any other experience there at Amazon. It's no different. You just use that link and you help contribute to the channel. Thank you so much. Also, sign up for the Voice of College Football community. Again, the links in the description section of any of the videos. Voice of College Football community. You get my weekly predictions. They were horrible today. Granted, I had a horrible week. I'll just say that right up front. A horrible week predicting games. But the first 4 weeks, or the first 3 weeks, were pretty exceptional. So I'm due a bad week. I'm not an odds maker. I'm not a handicapper, but I can predict college football games. More than that, you're helping us build the channel. You are also getting involved in a community where we have a number of content deliveries and other things planned for the community. So please join us on our Voice of College Football community. The links in the description section of any of the videos. My top 25 is coming out tomorrow. The top 25 that actually makes sense. And if you have any requests, please send them to me. Any content that you would like to request. If you look at this past week, we previewed the Tennessee-Florida video. Man, when it gets a certain time of night, I know that I need to go to bed. And I probably won't even do that for the next 2 hours because I'm going to watch all these games on DVR. We previewed the Tennessee video. We previewed the Tennessee-Florida game from both sides, the Tennessee side and the Florida side. We previewed Georgia and Notre Dame from both sides. We previewed USC and Utah. We previewed just Wisconsin, Michigan from both sides. Tons of preview videos each and every week. Please join us here. Lock it in for college football coverage. Tell your friends and family and your social media acquaintances that we are around. And I think it's pretty obvious from the way I'm talking right now that I need to sign off. You guys have a great weekend. We will see you tomorrow with the top 25 that actually makes sense. Let's see these comments. What do we got? James, thank you. You get it. Thank you so much. Some people will understand if these YouTube see it's which is way too late. When this YouTube channel, if it ever goes away, which I am going to fight like hell for it not to go away, for it to be sustainable and for it to make money so I can do this constantly. So thank you so much, James. I appreciate it. Do I take one more call? You guys can hear that I can't even talk at this point. All righty. Mark Riders TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, I just wanted to say hi.
Hi, George.
What a day. What a day. What a season. This is getting fun.
It is fun. I've tried to say bye like 18 times.
I know. I saw it. I just called to say bye.
Thanks, George.
OMG. OMG. What a day. Hey, did you see I put your number on there like 30 times?
I appreciate it, George. I really do. You know that.
The last time I did it, I said for a good time call, and I put your number like you see on a bathroom stall. That's hilarious, isn't it?
Everything that comes out of your mouth or off your fingertips onto a keyboard is hilarious, George.
Mark, I never text. One day I was walking down the road and my phone said "Speak now," and you see what happened. This is the result. I just
is that the problem? Okay, I can see it.
Yeah.
All right,
If
George.
I don't do anything, my phone says, "Come pick me up and talk to me." But that's another story. That's a script I'm working on for Hollywood.
Okay, George, you're in Oregon. It's 10:43 there.
The best day ever, man.
1:43 here.
We enjoyed this together. We can talk about this more tomorrow.
Yes, we've got 4 months to talk about it. We absolutely will.
I love you, man.
Thanks, George.
Go Gators. All right, later.
All right. Is that going to be the last call? I believe so. Thanks so much for all the comments in the live chat. I appreciate it. You guys are the best. All right. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Our top 25 is coming out tomorrow, and any other content creations that hit me. Conference rankings. Somebody wants me to do the ACC versus the American Conference. Maybe we get to that this week as well. Plus, I've reached out to all sorts of writers and broadcasters concerning Week 5 previews, which I think I outdid myself with all the previews from this past week. There were about 52 of them. All right, we will see all of you next time. Have a great rest of your weekend.